I love to see my people partying with me, man. Good to see you, Black Brown, Sweet Nikita, Miss Rhonda. Hey, happy birthday, Miss J. Hey, Rhea, Sweet Sharita. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby. Bring it to the front. Hey, Janine. Well, guess what? Hey, when I see you there, I get a little happy. Hey, Black Brown, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Baby, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Francine, I get a little happy when you party with me. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Jay, hey, Randy, I get happy when you party with me. Guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, Cole, I get a little happy. Happy when I see you. What? When I see you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody says your name. And my stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand on my knees, go away. What's happening to me? In the body, can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. We're gonna stop for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, see you. Hey, Marlon, you sexy boy. Hey. Oh, no. When I see you. Hey, fellas, listen. I scribble X and O's on my notebook. Checking out my hair and my nails. I feel myself up in the zone. You're nervous when you call. Say I'm not home. See your face. I hear my favorite song. Should I send an email at home? I wonder if you know, or do you have a clue? Yeah, I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. We're gonna stop for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. See you. Yeah. Marlon, so sexy boy. Oh, no. When I see you. Listen, something now is taking over me. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna run. I'm just gonna stand here and see. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, no. See you. Sitting so sexy, boy. Yeah. Oh, no. When I see you. Hey, Fox, hold me down. Listen. Well, guess what? When I see you. Yeah, yeah. Hey, sweet Savita. Hey. Get happy when you party with me. Hey, Janine. When I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Tony, I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Tim, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Marlon, I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Jay, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Nico, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Hey, when I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, Playboy, I get a little happy. What? Happy when you party with me.
my favorite comment right here.
Wait a minute. Look, hey, with that 669, damn you fine girl. Just give it to me one more time.
All right.
Get low.
Let's go.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Oh, yeah. What's up, world? What's up, good people? Welcome to our Mix What I Like right here, Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Welcome to all the remixers. Big shout out to Vybe Band. That's VYBE at DC Vybe. Grown Folks Go Go. And no, it's I love that the comment was asking. Now, Fantasia did not do a cover of that. Although at this point, I mean, her voice is crazy, but so I don't mean to disrespect that, but that's their song now. Oh man, it's The Pocket, that song in particular, but The Pocket is always an immediate mood elevator as we get started on this early Memorial Day morning. What's up, world? Welcome to the remixers who are here live. To those who will see and hear this later, welcome and peace to you as well. Like, share, subscribe, do all of those things. Find ways as best you can to support the platform, materially, immaterially, however is convenient for you. Liking, sharing, subscribing is of no cost to you. But if you want to add a little material support, you can go to blackpowermedia.org and pick your weapon of choice. Become a member. We're increasing the member-only content, including recent discussion of who killed George Jackson. It's crazy. So please check that out as well. So we're not doing Guerrilla Intellectual University this morning, and obviously, not because we're paying tribute to Memorial Day, but primarily because out of solidarity with the platform, and shout out to these folks. Shout out to all the people who invite Dr. Joy James and Kalanji Jamachanga to all manner of events all over the world, but not me. And I know it's done out of solidarity with the platform, so at least one of us is here to hold it down and maintain BPM's programming continuity. So shout out to the solidarity of those who only invite, I'm just playing, but who only invite my comrades, because I know it's done, you know, with the idea that we can't have all of us not be here. So so there it is. So it's all love. It's all love. So you know, we have to redistribute our resources. So it's a pleasure for me to be I'm sorry. I can't help it. But so it's a pleasure to be able to, you know. Oh, no question. No question. No question. And shout out to you, Emma, because I am really bad. Like on the one hand, I don't remember any of these holidays. I don't even remember my own birthday. I do remember my wife's birthday, my children's birthday, and our anniversary. Those are the only dates. But outside of that, I do struggle to remember a lot of the important dates. So thanks, Emma, for reminding us. And rest in power and peace to those legendary freedom fighters that you raised up earlier, Maurice Bishop being one of them, and now I can't even remember who the other person was, so I'm trying to scroll back real quick. I was just like, here we go. Thank you very much. Betty Shabazz, of course. Thank you. I am terrible at remembering dates like this, so shout out to you for that. Thank you very much. And yeah. But yeah, you know, it is what it is. But I did put together a number of things for us to get through today, actually. So we're going to start with a little bit of jokes, as we've already begun. and increasingly get to a little more seriousness. And then, of course, if you all, I'm up for whatever today. I did sort of pack my roster, but if you know, we can invite folks up to join me. We can get into some comments and criticism. One I'll say very quickly was that somebody put a comment on one of the recent videos. Maybe we'll come back to it later, but it was akin to, Jared, you think too much, and that's never going to get me. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the solidarity with the platform to make sure that there's always no, but the comment was along those lines of it said, Jared, he's always finding in holes in people's arguments and complaining, and I'm like, that's never the best approach to get constructive criticism from me. It sounds like you think too much, and that doesn't work. But anyway, so we're going to start with a little bit of comedy. A slight trigger warning. I think I should maybe. And then a lot of interesting things to get to. And then, like I said, I'll invite your involvement to the extent you all like. Oh wait, it's going to start funny, get a little serious, and there's going to be a little more humor, and then it's going to get a little serious, and then it's going to end. I think that's the way it looks on my run sheet here, my little notes. But we'll end on an appropriate, I think, serious note. And but anyway, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Make sure you are all bell runged up and everything, so you don't miss all the stuff coming. Remix Morning Show coming back this week, and many more offerings throughout the week on the platform. Okay. I agree. I'm like, think more, be more critical, find more things wrong. You know. And then some of it is, if people make mistakes, as we all do, I mean, it's not, anyway, it's whatever. It's all good. So here, let's get started. Let's get started with this. This one I couldn't, was sent to me. And, you know, so we talk a lot here about, you know, we just did the discussion for the members only and patrons. Shout out to you all. Thank you all very much for your support of the platform. But we, you know, I've shared my bias, my affinity for George Jackson, for the BLA, for Dhoruba bin Wahad, for not advocating armed struggle, of course, but just always remembering, at least honoring the fact that it has played a role in political struggles throughout world history and here, and shouldn't be denigrated just out of hand. It should be acknowledged as part of people's struggle, even if it makes us uncomfortable, even as we are not advocating it here, just pointing that out. But when you see videos like this, you know, when it was sent to me, my response to my buddy that sent it to me was, well, so much for armed struggle. So we might as well find another solution, because if this is
hold it down, you got this. You got this. Do your thing. Fucking right. Be a gangster. You a gangster. Oh, bah. Another one bites the dust.
Trigger warnings, puns intended. It makes me, when I see stuff like that, it makes me.
What is we doing?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, what are they doing? What are you doing? Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I watched all of the Beige Rage. And in fact, maybe I should move that up in the run sheet, because just to keep the continuity. But you know what? I mean, it is sad. It is hilarious. It is demoralizing if there's a certain, you know, because what I've always loved about the shotgun is the ease. Point, both hands, lean in a little bit, tuck in, you know, and that's it. And then everything, there's no precision necessary. It's a beautiful, in that regard, it's a beautiful weapon. But what is we doing? What is we doing? Anyway, so that was one. Now this is another trigger warning of sorts, coming from the good folks in the advertising community, who particularly, you know, we talked about them a little while ago as the young, well, not just young, but the good people in Utah had to struggle to find their VPNs to get access to PornHub. Well, PornHub has offered up an advertising campaign to help the good people, not just of Utah, but of anyone. You know, this is let's just
open to slide 3 from the video I sent you this morning.
Actually,
wait a minute.
Start off with
Let me start this again.
slide 3 from the video I sent you this
can I
morning.
actually hop off this call since I'm not on this account?
It's no problem.
Okay,
Go ahead, Sean.
Sure. Let's just start off with January 2020. Now, consumer spending is up. If you look at the graph right below.
What page are we on?
I'm sorry, we're on page 12, the second graph from the top.
Okay.
Danielle, turn your camera off.
All right. So if you look, we're 0.15% higher than 2019. We started this quarter off at 2.75%.
Holy shit.
Daniel.
God.
I don't think he's
Daniel.
January.
Can you do that for us?
Daniel.
Daniel.
Call Mika.
Oh my God.
You call Daniel on his cell. Call Daniel on his cell. How do we turn this feed off?
Wow.
We can't.
Oh, hell no.
Daniel. Oh my God. Daniel is the host. Holy shit. Oh my God. Oh.
Yes.
Daniel.
No, this is too much. Oh my God.
This is great.
Whoops, what did I just do here? I just messed my whole, what'd I just do here? Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Happy Masturbation Day. So I was looking through, you know, I watched the advertising age and ad week and the you know, the trade publications for advertising, and I got to shout them out for that. That's a good campaign. And I was thinking, you know, in another life, if maybe at one point I hadn't been introduced as a child to radical history or whatever, just become a normal whatever, marketing would have been a fun career. I could see why that would have been a fun career. But yeah, careful. Anyway, so maybe, you know what, I think that was a good point. I think we should let's stick with the trajectory that we've set and stay sort of in a consistent, you know, starting from the insane to the more you know, to the purely comedic, and sort of ascend to the more political. So I think I did get caught up these last maybe 48 hours, 36 hours in the Beige Rage, the latest in Beige Rage. And I think, you know, again, I can't prove this, but it seems like, I think, again, more folks than want to acknowledge are watching BPM, because I feel like this is borrowing from us. So I saw, you know, this dude, what is his name? Cesar Pena and DjEnvy. So you know, have gotten into this black capitalist real estate scammery. So just to back up a little bit, if oh man, there's so much. Now there's yeah, I you know, like, I feel like we as a platform were leading the Beige Rage and Beijing jokes and all that kind of stuff. I feel like, you know what I mean, you know, but the first thought I had for people of my age, I know Envy's, I think, younger, but people who have been around long enough will remember sort of the rise of a DjEnvy. The coming out of New York in the mixtape community, where he was actually a DJ, where he was part of the way I remember it, the post DJ Clue era of CDJ DJ mixtape DJs who might occasionally throw a DJ trick or skill on a mixtape, but mostly were just sort of lining up exclusive tracks that were delivered to them by the record companies underground, under the table, as an underground marketing ploy. So as he ascended and became part of the Breakfast Club and all of that, and as people have been asking me over the years here and there, particularly when the buying power argument got more popular, relatively speaking, and more associated with me, and my work started more and more to focus on it. Why aren't you getting invited? And why aren't you in these spaces? And I keep reminding people, or the question would often be, why aren't you on the Breakfast Club? And I would say, like, it's not up to me. It's not like I'm saying I'm not, you know, but the real reason is of course the media environment and what it's here to do and all of that. But is that people like this end up becoming, as is becoming more apparently clear, involved in participating in the arenas that I and others have been most critical of. So this was discussed. This was from last night's live on JT, the Pocket Watchers platform. And again, on the one hand, shout out to JT and his crew, and he had TonyTheCloser and Eli on. And again, you know, I appreciate what they do, given that they don't promise to be revolutionaries or political radicals. What I don't appreciate, obviously, as we talked a little bit about, is that ultimately they're arguing that capitalism can work, business can work, investing can work, and financial literacy can work if not scammed, if you're not hustling and you're being responsible or being hustled. Obviously, I don't go that far. You know, to me, it's, again, there's where therein lies the difference. But, and I don't know, but essentially what Envy has gotten himself into, apparently, allegedly, in working with this Pena character, is inviting people with his brand, using that is Envy's brand, to invest, to and I'll play a little bit of this where TonyTheCloser is calling him out for it.
Like when it comes to season.
And again, TonyTheCloser on the top part of the screen there, he is not, again, he's one of those who's arguing, I can make the market work. I make money. And you know, if we just get away from the frauds, we can make money. And I don't know anything about him or to what extent he's not himself a fraud, other than my own argument that anyone advocating for investment in Black capitalism and financial literacy, when financial literacy is not defined as an end of capitalism and colonialism and et cetera and so forth. I don't know to what extent that they're not frauds, but in the sense of they're not aggressively, overtly scamming and Ponzi scheming and all of that, I think that there is a difference. But on this, he's got Envy on the call here, and he's looking to challenge Envy on the claims. And the basic point is that Envy has used his platform, his name, and his brand to partner with this dude Pena to get people to invest in real estate with the promise of 20% returns and this, that, and the third. And they like using ROI. The ROI is going to be so, return on investment is going to, and they like using the lingo and that, and but apparently this dude Pena has a long career of, or I don't know, he apparently has a track record of issues. He has apparently not been on the up and up. And now people are saying they're losing a lot of money, and Envy is now being asked, well, what role are you playing, given that you put your PR on it? And here's a little bit of how it went.
We've had a conversation, and I spoke to him, and I spoke to Jen, and I told him if he does, and I asked him personally, I said, do you owe people money?
Does he owe you money?
We have an investment together that we're going to sell. He does not owe me money. We partnered up on a property. We partnered up on a property.
Does he
went half. It's
owe you money, DjEnvy?
It's a school. Let me tell you.
You and I talked offline, DjEnvy.
No, I'm gonna tell you 100%. No, I'm gonna tell you.
You can't do that, DjEnvy.
I'm gonna tell you the truth. You're gonna let me speak or we not?
No, but we gotta if we're gonna tell the truth, we gotta tell the truth.
We gonna tell the truth.
Now
we speaking the truth. Because I tell you everything. I talk to you offline.
That's what I'm saying.
I told you me and Caesar, we bought a school. That's the only outstanding deal that we have. That school never came back, and that school is not done yet. When I spoke to Caesar today, I told him I have a problem, and he said, I'm giving you your money back. That's it. So we don't have any dealings with each other. And I even told you, because when we had that conversation, I called him last night. I'm like, do you?
And I'm sorry, I forgot to finish my own point. Just real quick, the point I was making about remembering Envy from the music world, or being introduced to him in the music world, is that he's doing the same thing now that he has always ever been doing. The point I was trying to make about the mixtape is that folks like this are constantly positioning themselves and being positioned to be the conduit through which white corporate tentacles can reach Black and brown communities. So whether it's turning the mixtape, the beautifully originally unsanctioned underground communicative network of the hip hop mixtape, and turning that into a commercial product through people like DjEnvy and Clue and others like that, then promoting them, even elevating them even more to Breakfast Club and other platforms to do even more of that invitation through Black and brown face into the white colonial experience. And then here again, where they've elevated into car, or expanded into car shows and real estate and crypto and all of this other kind of stuff. And it's all ultimately the same thing. Black and brown face for white capital.
You owe anybody money? Caesar told me no. He said there was people that we invested with that did well, and there was people that we didn't invest with that it takes a little longer. And I told him, nigga, whatever you need to do, give them people back their money. That's all it is. But when it comes to it, that's what it is. And you find somebody else that will talk to you on live.
The claims of the 20% were on real estate.
But
not on the school.
But we talked offline though. That's why I asked you the question. And it's like, we personally offline. I mean, I know you might be wanting to still not really throw your man under, but like, we talked offline. And
we spoke online yesterday. That's why I was kind of upset when you put out a picture of me and Caesar and said DjEnvy's partner owes all this money. And I'm like, damn, my nigga, we spoke last night. And I'm telling you, I would tell you. But, I get it. My name on it is a little, you get more clicks and all that.
1,000% it gets more clicks. But that's the same thing you do when you call out real estate investors and then you do a real estate event. That's called marketing, right? That was part of your marketing. Like you throwing somebody under the bus that fucks with you.
So that's basically how the exchange went for that. there was one other part that I wanted to play from that exchange, though. Let me bring it up to that part real quick. I just want to. There was one part here. Hold on, wait, yeah, I forgot. Let me play this one more part here.
Live, and there's nobody in here that could ever say Envy. They gave Envy $1. I done helped everybody get homes. I done helped over 1,000 people get into homes, and that's celebrities from Terrence J to Sean King to so many different people get.
That was it right there. Because this to me is this is indicative of a lot of different things, including where quote unquote activism is. What did he say?
And there's nobody in here that could ever say Envy. They gave Envy $1. I done helped everybody get homes. I done helped over 1,000 people get into homes, and that's celebrities from Terrence J to Sean King to so many different people get houses. To regular people.
That's my point. That's my point. What are we doing? What are we doing? Where's my man at?
What is we doing?
Wow. Yeah, I said that was my favorite part. That was, or at least one of my favorite parts. I mean, even for a moment, I'm tempted to do it. It's happening again in my own head. I was intellectually going down the rabbit hole of how did we even get to a point where the leading activists and radical journalists are linking up with the DjEnvys, and you know, it's and then we end up, oh, where did I just put that? There's so much stuff flying around, it's hard to keep up with. I don't think I put it there. Where did I put that? Oh, where did I put that? Oh, well. Anyway, but that's yeah, I thought that part was pretty telling. Now, it was interesting because I did watch a lot of JT's live last night, and they, let's see, they go through and make a number of interesting points, I think, including showing I mean, they go through some of the documents on what these dudes were doing with the money and people. I mean, anyway, I don't know. I don't think there was any. Was there anything I wanted to play in particular? I don't know. I can put the link in the chat, or people can find it if they want to watch the whole thing. But the notes that I made here were that yeah, it wasn't really to play anything. They just go into more detail about the whole history and arrangements, and go through some of the documents from what has been released or been put out publicly, or people sharing with TonyTheCloser and others their documents on, you know, showing what they invested and what they have been promised. And I think this one or another one, they were, one of them, this is where they were talking about the 20% promises return on investment. And they were saying every 6 months, you're going to get a return, an ROI of 20%, which on its face should have told people not to do it. I mean, that's, you can't, those promises are insane. And I think the person they're talking about here lost upwards of $64,000, and was not alone. There were a number of people, including bigger whales, that got taken in Cesar Pena's, or are alleged to have been taken in Senior Pena. But the notes that I made here were and I'll come back to this later, but in terms of the buying power mythology, but all of this to me emanates from the buying power mythology, including the critiques from JT and his crew, which are legit critiques. I mean, from the perspective of people who believe in the traditional workings of American business and capitalism. But the mythologies, in other words, we sent JT a copy of the forthcoming second edition of my book because I was hoping he might actually, given the exchange he was having with Geechee, might actually read it. Because I don't know, there's always this, I don't know, maybe who knows what I was hoping would happen with that. But the point I'm getting at here is that even their criticisms are themselves responses to the mythology that I'm talking about in the work. That is the evolution of Black capitalist mythology, buying power specifically, this idea that capitalism can be made to work, even for the formerly enslaved, even for the formerly still colonized, even for those most abused. So again, while I understand the righteousness of their initial design to not want Black people to rip off other Black people under the guise of doing it for the culture and helping the people, they themselves are extensions of that same mythology because they themselves believe in the Black capitalist method of civil rights or liberation. And then I wrote here that they themselves cannot engage in criticism of capitalism in the mythology because they are all trying to eat directly from it. So whether it's Envy and him trying to get in his business dealings, or whether it's JT and his crew who are financial advisors and whatever, they're all trying to eat from a capitalist economy that they argue, and for them relatively does well. The last point I made is that they point out quite rightly that in their criticisms of Umar Johnson, Jay Morrison, and formerly popular brother Polite, that all of those gentlemen had been previous guests on The Breakfast Club with DjEnvy. So part of what they're pointing out is that Envy has long been in this game of platforming people who hustle their own people, and then he himself has allegedly been invited to do the same thing. And then his responses and as they talk about throughout this extensive live stream, which was entertaining, that he's like, yeah, I use my brand to get people to invest, but they got to do their own homework. And if you get taken, that's on you. It's not my responsibility. So it's a lot of that. Yeah. So I guess that was it for that. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else had any particular thoughts on any of that or something to share in particular on that issue. But yeah, that's it. That's it. You know. And what's up, Adam? How you doing, man? Good to see you. And sorry I didn't get a chance to catch up with you at ALD yesterday. And shout out to everybody who was in fact there in Baltimore and wherever else you might have celebrated. Though I was not able to get there after he left the next morning, not yesterday, but Saturday. I'm sorry, but yesterday I did get to run into Brother Geechee. He came out to these tree-lined streets, and we got to break bread, and which was cool because we, he came out to
tree-lined streets,
and despite all this time, this online engagement, I don't think we had ever actually met in person before. So that was pretty cool. So, and so that was dope. It was good to catch up with him real quick. And oh right, we got to put the symbol up. do you work on the plantation that Del Jones called the N Factory? So I think this was this the last convocation I was invited to speak at? Maybe the second to last. It may be the last one. Actually, it may be the very last one. I don't get invited to convocations anymore. For a good number of years, I was a regular invitee to convocations, and then I did see one of the emails that she's now she has since died, unfortunately. But this sister that used to work there, that was one of the low key comrades, the low key undercover allies of your boy, sent me this email. And that I wasn't supposed to see, that basically said, in response to students requesting my involvement, enough with Dr. Ball. He's been pick somebody else. He's been in enough of these. But the point is, at the last one, I read a section from Gil Scott's The N Factory. The nigger factory. I think it's important to actually say the word in that context. He and I said, and of course his point was, are you as a Black university are you going to produce, what are you going to produce? Revolutionaries or the opposite? So whether you want to call it an N factory or something else, it is, as an institution, not here to produce the consciousness that many of us in this space hold, myself included. So, but you know, I don't, thanks for the super chat. And I don't think I do know Dr. Hayes. So I'm happy to be introduced. Right. Right on ZZ line. I appreciate that. So, all right. Anyway, so speaking of African Liberation Day, while not in physical attendance, my shout out to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And why is it showing up like that? Why is it showing up like that? Yeah, why is it? That's very odd. I'm not sure why it's showing up like that. But shout out to the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and where in my work study group, we read The Meaning of African Liberation Day from Walter Rodney, which was a good reminder. And we had a good discussion about it because, well, obviously it raises a number of important points. A couple of which I'd like to just quickly raise here for today, and why I, again, big shout out to right on, to those who continue to uphold African Liberation Day. I have admitted some frustration at times with all the different factions that exist. Sometimes, a couple times being in DC, and there's like 5 different ALD events happening at the same time, and all of them have the same, about 10 people in them. But they all have their different factions and different approaches, and that require separate events. But anyway, it's very important. And I think what Rodney raises here, among other things, is and I'll just bring up a couple points here, is maybe today more than ever, or becoming ever increasingly important. And obviously, you're talking about in response to colonization and enslavement, he says here that we have a problem of identification. We do not know who we are. And that is why this gathering is of great symbolic importance, because it is an act of identification. Factions, my dude, factions. And everybody got 5 people in them. and have the answer and the very important reason why they can't work with other people. But, and I don't know, honestly, I don't know how to engage this, but I feel like there's needs to be more engagement, maybe on my part and others, around where the identity issue within the identity issues occurs for those of us who are mixed or biracial or multiracial or whatever people want to use as a phrase. Few things around in my sphere have reminded me that might be becoming more of an issue than I might be aware. But anyway, but we have a problem with identification. And when we make this identification that we are African, of course, African people, we have no illusions about the fact that this is a very revolutionary initiative. It is a rejection of every other form of identification with which the white society has asked us to accept. Now, of course, he knew better, and he knew that it was not a request that white folks were making. And this is why, again, SODA is so important. And I saw somebody give me credit for the acronym SODA, Solidarity of Dispersed or Diaspora Africans, and I cannot take credit for it. That comes from Dr. Haight, who passed it on to me, and I am happy to carry it into, as much as possible, the public sphere. But this was always the point I was making from the very beginning with the reverse hashtag and other communities, that what for me at the time was a naive misunderstanding of what why they were criticizing Pan-Africanism. What I was trying to remind them was that whatever the popular presentation of Pan-Africanism was today, and all that is there for ripe for critique, that underneath it, as Rodney is reminding, it is a rejection of what white people have imposed through colonization and enslavement, and it is itself a revolutionary initiative. So we can be critical of forms of Pan-Africanism or the application perhaps, but to be dismissive of it whole cloth and to regress into some sort of intensely narrow nationalistic acceptance of colonization and identity that comes with it is clearly a reactionary backwards position to take. And I do like this point he's making here, that Africans are taken off the continent and mysteriously disappear and become Negroes and are reduced to things and pieces. Now, of course, the best part of this essay is his reminder, his shout out here to Maryland. I don't know what happened in my home state that he was particularly referring to, but as he says here, we were brought to this section of the world, and in Washington and in Virginia and in Maryland. My God, in Maryland, a cracker was shot the other day and turned into breeding grounds. So I don't know, quite in opposition to the video we played at the top of the show, somebody apparently had figured out how to use that weaponry. But his point here, by the way, is exactly right. And to the extent that folks are not aware, who are not from this region, who maybe are, Maryland and Virginia in particular were among the first states to reject the importation of new Africans, not because they had a problem with enslaving Africans, but because they had become the dominant quote unquote breeding states, where they didn't want new imports because it would mess up their cottage industry of breeding and then selling into the deeper South there, as Rodney points out, pieces. So he's right to bring it up, and he's right to put African people back into not only a Pan-African diaspora context, but as he does here, put us back into the context of global anti-imperial struggle. I do not say to understand who we are is the be all and end all. On the contrary, it is merely a very short step forward in the struggle, because freedom is a long road. Freedom is the road which the Vietnamese people travel on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, each man and woman carrying 60 pounds weight. Freedom is the long road which the brothers from Angola and in the movement for the popular liberation of Angola, that is the road which they take week after week, crossing eastern Angola, indeed crossing Zambia, crossing the plains, crossing the flooded rivers, crossing the swamps to engage with the enemy. That is the road to freedom. And I really appreciate that, because not only in the context of what I was just saying a minute ago about the increased struggle over identity and the new and more sophisticated assaults on Pan-African consciousness, but I think the same thing as what I've been arguing through Chris Mott's point about the woke imperium, or other people's variations of the same argument. There is an insufficiency involved in people's, I think, imposed or encouraged focus on identity and every form of identity. And we are encouraged to stop there. And instead of, as I think Rodney is saying here, to recognize that it is not the end all and be all. It is a pathway. It is part of a doorway or a path to greater struggle and revolution. So we can't just stop at whatever our favorite identities are. All of them have to be used to get us to the point of being, as he says here, on the actual road to freedom. So he makes points about, just somewhat passingly about, saying that we're not passive people, that as I would interpret it, the adoption of a Pan-African or any radical form of identification, again, is not the complete step, and that there's more to do it, and that is part of the anti-passivity of the people. He recognizes that again, just in passing, that armed struggle is the highest level of struggle. Recognizes, the failings of the white working class in South Africa. What was the last? I think there was only one other. Oh, and of course, he makes reference to critique of Zionism and I missed it, but he shouts out the Soledad brothers is the point I was trying to look for. He right here, there it is. So as he says, let me move toward a conclusion. Brothers and sister, that has to be a typo, right? There was definitely more than one woman there, right? A conclusion which asks you to bear in mind what this gathering symbolizes. It symbolizes a no to Nixon, a no to the murderous policies in Vietnam, and a no to the United States companies which are investing and exploiting on the African continent, a no to NATO, which provides Portugal with the wherewithal to bomb and blast our African brother who are struggling for their rights in their own land. There must have been an issue with the plurality here. That must be an explicit no. It is also a yes. It is an affirmation. We are saying yes to the line which was developed by people like Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Frantz Fanon. We are saying yes to the struggle in Africa, which is led by such giants as Ahmed Sekou Touré, Julius Nyerere. And we are saying yes to people like the Soledad brothers and the martyrs of Attica. So what I really like about this, the gender imbalance notwithstanding, what I really like that he's doing here is he's again saying it's not enough to just have a simple identity. It's not enough to just have a claim of a sort of philosophical or theoretical or ideological approach to the world. And it's not enough to just be saying no, or it's not enough to just do that. It must also aggressively denounce certain politics and positions like Nixon, Vietnam, NATO, etc. And then it must, on the other end, affirm a politics. And I really like that because it helps, again, reduce the kind of confusion that we are continuing to suffer with a greater degree of sophistication. And so I think, so shout out to him for that. Yeah. Aggressively, right on. No, right on. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, I really appreciate all of that. And you know what? This is perfect, because I wouldn't have, had I not been engaged in some sort of collective organizational work that put that text to use for us this weekend, put it back at the top of my mind and in my notes, and had me put it here. If I was just out here by myself, I would have forgotten. I wouldn't have, just like even to Emma's point earlier, I didn't even, I can't remember Betty Shabazz's birthday, Maurice Bishop's birthday, and all that kind of stuff. So we got to be working in collectives anyway, but right on. And I'll put the link in the show description when I wrap up. And to several of these things, because there's some more here too. Now there's a couple other, I did also want to, in that same vein, come back to this book that I just went blank again. Open to Shock encouraged us to look at, because I went back and I've been looking at it again, and this FrankKitson Low Intensity Operations book, and there's a section in here where he's talking about, he does a version of response to one of my favorite quotes from Marshall McLuhan. When McLuhan said, "We don't know who discovered water, but we know it was not the fish, because an all-pervasive environment is always beyond perception." Kitson puts a twist, not acknowledging McLuhan, but he puts a twist on that by saying that part of the low-intensity function of operations is to pollute the water in advance of guerrilla insurgency development within colonized territories. So he talks about the use specifically of law as part of the propaganda. He even calls law, he even calls law part of the propaganda that will he refers to law as part of the propaganda that will be used. Here it is on page 69. Broadly speaking, there are two possible alternatives in terms of the way law should work. The first one being that the law should be used as just another weapon in the government's arsenal, and in this case, it becomes little more than a propaganda cover for the disposal of unwanted members of the public. It's in the context of him talking about, again, low intensity operations, and in the section where he's talking about the nonviolent phase before the insurgents have risen, before they have engaged in guerrilla warfare. There's a struggle for the minds of the people. There's a struggle for, and he goes into some of this. There's a struggle to get for them, the handful of people, the relatively small part of the population that will engage in armed struggle, meant to encourage others to join them. And then there's the nonviolent organizers who will have an easier time getting a broader section of the population to support their work, because more people are willing to be nonviolent and protest than they are to become violent in protest. But that he talks about this as a middle ground population that, from his perspective, can also become weaponized against radical insurgencies and guerrilla development. So but it was just those quick points I wanted to raise very quickly, as I'm still slowly working through that book, because it's yeah, a sort of fascinating look from the perspective of the colonizer. And it's very clear. The ultimate concern for him in this context is the suppression of violent rebellion. But the preparatory work that goes into that involves messaging, involving themselves with the civil society, the law. And then I really liked how he put that the law is just a cover. That step one, he does. Step two, by the way, is him saying that the law would be used as it should be, more or less, that it should be used that as in the ideal, where everybody is treated equally and fairly. But then he says, but operating this way can result in delays, which might be impossible to accept if, for example, it looked as if the subversion was going to be used in conjunction with an orthodox invasion or with the threat of one. So in other words, he's saying, ideally, we want to have the court system and the law work. You would want a society where everybody's treated equally and fairly, but only if there is no threat of the proper function of colonization being upset, at which point you got to go to function one. And we're just using the law as just another weapon in the government's arsenal, as little more than a propaganda cover for the disposal of unwanted members of the public. And do we not see that here in the United States, maybe more than ever, with a perfection, maybe more than in any other point in human history? He says elsewhere in the book that the United States was ahead of Britain in managing its territories and its populations. He hasn't specifically mentioned Black people yet. I haven't seen him specifically reference Black people as sort of in the internal colony, but you could see the methods being the same. Black people are prone to commit crimes. What can we do but lock them up? Mumia isn't a political prisoner. He killed a police officer. Leonard Peltier isn't a political prisoner, even though we acknowledge in the documents that the FBI don't know who killed their own agents and they just needed to put somebody in jail. He's accused of killing some people. There's no political prisoners in the United States. Yeah, the gene. I was on a panel when I used to be invited to panels when the former head of the political science department at Morgan State from somewhere in the Caribbean said Black Americans have a culture predisposing them to crime. What can you do but lock them up? And do you know that the sister that warned me years ago to leave it alone and not debate him and not call him out and not challenge him, since that time, our careers have gone in diametrically opposed directions. I will have to say that. She may have been right. My suspicion is if you were to search her name and look for academic production, you would find none. But you would find or public intellectual work, none. But you would find sort of a cottage industry of how should I put it? Teacher training within the university, where even though she was name checked, wow, this is deep. Now, my bad for this detour, but she was name checked as a potential threat along with me back at this one point in time. But since then, she's getting presidential accommodations and paychecks and this and that, and me the exact opposite. So maybe she was right, because I called him out and we debated, and it didn't. I mean, it was a clear victory. It was such a lopsided victory. It was insane, but it was a what do they call it? A Pyrrhic victory, because I didn't get nothing for it. Anyway, I got Whew. Wait a minute. Yeah, I gotta get this together. This is I gotta get my new because this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. This guy right here. Oh, man. And if you haven't seen Office Space, you know, it's worth a couple hours of silly time if you got it. Anyway. Okay. Anyway, where was I? But anyway, so that shout out to Oba Tashaka for that suggestion. That book is fascinating. All right. Let's keep moving on here. So back to this little marketing piece. This stuff is wild. To me, this is very deep. Why Black-owned media favors direct sales over programmatic advertising. Now, just quickly, and I had to look this up myself because I'm not up on the latest of everything. So let me back up here for a second because I want to share so we're all on the same page. Programmatic advertising is the use of automated technology for media buying, the process of buying advertising space, as opposed to traditional, often manual methods of digital advertising. Programmatic media buying utilizes data insights and algorithms to serve ads to the right user at the right time and at the right price. All right. So instead of, you know, can I put my ad on your show and pay you X dollars? No, we're going to use programmatic. Well, increasingly, folks are wanting to use programmatic media, which allows for algorithms so they can using all the data mining that we provide and all that is taken from us, they can put all that together and target ads. And from the perspective of the ad buyers, it is seen as a benefit because they feel like they can more directly, they can get better bang for their buck. They can spend exactly what they want for targeted messaging directly to the people that they're trying to market to, and they don't feel like they have to waste any of it with any of their marketing going to other spaces. But the problem is, well, we'll come to that. Let's just read a little bit of this. Media ad dollars are increasingly favoring programmatic platforms such as automated buying. The trend was essential to Disney's upfront pitch, and nearly 30% of 2022 deals were programmatic guaranteed, according to a survey by the Trade Desk. But while massive media companies may encourage marketers to automate buys because their portfolio of assets, across their portfolio of assets, not all media partners find the method ideal or even allow it. Black-owned media company Revolt, that's Puffy and them, doesn't permit programmatic buying for its content, said CEO Datavio Samuels this week during Ad Age's State of TV Advertising Conference. Rather, Samuels asks brands to conduct deals directly with Revolt so that they fully understand the company's opportunities for tailored messaging to its Black audience. There's a responsibility to our consumers to make sure that the brands that show up on our platform, consumers know and can trust and believe that those are brands that are committed to the community and are investing in the community in a real way, said Samuels. What we never wanted to do was build programmatic pipes that allow brands to pop in, spend $1,000, and then tout and brag about how they were spending with Black-owned media or spending with Revolt when it wasn't a real commitment. We see programmatic as an opportunity for brands to get away with performative activism. Now, of course, Samuels and Revolt and Black-owned commercial media are themselves engaged in what he's calling performative activism by claiming Black ownership and Black pride and doing things for the community and for the culture. What they're really saying is we want more money and we want more sustainable ad buying. We don't want you being able to drop in, as he said, spend a couple. The complaint isn't that they're just spending $1,000 on a direct ad buy. The complaint is you're only spending $1,000 on one direct ad buy as opposed to developing broader, more sustainable, more lucrative relationships over time. They call it, as Samuels does, performative activism. with the claim, of course, rightly, that companies are just faking some sort of care for Black people. But he is, of course, doing the same thing by claiming to represent Black people, but really only looking to attract and accumulate more ad revenue for himself, for his Black capitalist class, commercial media class peers and colleagues. And that's the hustle that is, as they say in the business community, passed on to the rest of us as consumers. Although some brands have long been investing in diverse media space, the murder of George Floyd in 2020 inspired an industry-wide movement to be more inclusive of specifically Black-owned media in budgets, in ad budgets. By the way, and I don't know if it's my own myopia, but it is already beginning to feel like George Floyd is almost exclusively referenced in relationship to anything other than his own life, his own experience, police violence, or the actual conditions of Black communities. It is almost seems entirely referenced in connection to ad revenue, activist budgets, et cetera, and so forth. Anyway, Ad Age recently found that while overall ad spend in that market had grown from 2021 to 2022, investments in Black-owned media made up only 1.16% of the total ecosystem measured by the Standard Media Index. So that's really the issue that Samuels and others are worried about. It's not that the issue isn't programmatic ad buys allow for people to get a phony sense of commitment to the Black community, performance activism. It's that it allows them to keep, even as overall expenditure on ad revenue goes up, it only gets to 1% for Black media, and that's what they're ultimately concerned with. As uncertain economic conditions and the threat of recession loom over this year. And so this part of so the rest of this article is in them talking about, they're saying, well, we're headed towards a recession. So won't that mean less ad revenue in general, and therefore less ad revenue for Black media? And the Black media, those wanting that Black ad revenue or ad revenue for their Black media are saying, don't hit me with that nonsense about a recession. We know we don't expect that to hurt the money that's coming to us. Of course, connected to their performance activism, what that ends up creating for most of us in this space is more of the problem against which we have to resist, which is as we try to, and this actually is a theme throughout some of the other stuff we're going to get to the rest of this morning, but as we keep trying to raise certain levels of consciousness, there is so much media projected, well-funded media projected back to our communities that is saying, you don't need radicalism, you need financial literacy, or you can go shopping, or you can buy Black, or you can, it makes it very difficult. So even as there is a recession, and people might be feeling that, particularly Black workers might start feeling that more and more and more, there's going to be more promotion, or there's an attempt at least to promote more to those same audiences, an unreality of a potential for an improved condition, for a better world, or things aren't so bad. You might be suffering, but another beautiful Black person over here is doing well, so chill. Like that's, and then here we all show up, and it becomes that much more. It's a slick, and then they get to call this, Revolt TV gets to call them performance activists, and meaning what of themselves? So, begging for crumbs and fighting to provide ad buyers with fantasies of Black life, culture. So that I like my note there, that they're begging for crumbs while fighting to provide ad buyers with fantasies of Black life, culture, and economic condition. Because the greater a fantasy they can produce for those ad buyers, the more likely they'll attract ad revenue. Black people aren't upset. Black people aren't your enemy. Black people aren't a threat. Black people just want to shop, and they have plenty of money to do it with. Okay. All right. You know what? Let's take a quick, very short break that I will use to encourage you to support the platform, like, share, subscribe, join, and we'll be right back.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. A little more DC vibe. Shout out to the Vybe band. Okay. Yeah, break time. Break time. Quick break time. Back here at I Mix What I Like, Black Power Media. Thanks everybody for checking us out. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Oh man, the pocket, it's the best thing in the world. It's the best groove ever invented, bar none. Best, there is, you know, a lot of great African rhythms out there. Salsa does its thing too, but anyway. Let's keep it moving here. Got a couple other things specifically to get to what is the day, Memorial Day, and just sort of the general propaganda around and the whole U.S. narrative for one. Ooh, double check that. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me just make sure I didn't lose. All right. Okay, sorry about that. I do like to check in on this publication too, to get from the perspective of the military, from military.com, what and this story that they published, from Civil War to today's mattress sales, Memorial Day is full of contradiction. And I do not know why. Anyway, it doesn't matter, whatever. Full of contradiction. And there was a couple interesting tidbits to this. Of course, from their perspective, you know, Memorial Day was developed in the after the Civil War as a tribute to those fallen. There's little controversy over the first national observance of what was then called Decoration Day. It occurred May 30th, 1868, after an organization of Union veterans called for decorating war graves with flowers which were in bloom. The idea that flowers bloom at this point in May. But as noted here, as early as 1869, the New York Times wrote that the holiday could become sacrilegious and no longer sacred if it focuses more on pomp, dinners, and oratory. In 1871, the abolitionist FrederickDouglass feared Americans were forgetting the Civil War's impetus, slavery, when he gave a Decoration Day speech at Arlington National Cemetery. We must never forget, he said, that the loyal soldiers who rest beneath this sod flung themselves between the nation and the nation's destroyers, Douglas said, and was concerned that it would later become known as a white Memorial Day, forgetting the 180,000 roughly black men who served in the Union Army. And of course, at least one of them being a woman, in Harriet Tubman, who is now being considered by the state as one of the nation's finest spies, which is, anyway. Memorial Day's potency diminished somewhat with the addition of Armistice Day, which marked World War I's end, November 11th, and became Veterans Day after 1938. These days, Memorial Day sales and traveling are deeply woven into the nation's muscle memory. This weekend, 2.7 million more people will travel for the unofficial start of summer compared to last year, according to AAA. So I thought that was interesting. Just a couple tidbits there were interesting, that from almost day one, it was recognized what this country does. It co-ops, symbolizes, and commodifies everything, even what is nominally important to itself. Which and speaking of that selling of the mythology of the country, right along with it comes what has been going on this past week of man, if Reagan was the devil, then I don't know what is Henry Kissinger. What is called here by John Schwartz's Intercept article, the bloodiest social climber, who turned 100 this past week, and is getting some praise. So in this story here, in 2002, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and his wife attended an elegant dinner party hosted by Barbara Walters. Other participants included Time editor Henry Grunwald, one-time ABC chair Thomas Murphy, and Peter Jennings, then the anchor of ABC's World News Tonight. At one point in the evening, as New York Magazine recounted, Jennings addressed Kissinger and asked him, "How does it feel to be a war criminal, Henry?" Kissinger didn't respond. Folks said it was unsuitable, thought it wasn't so funny, that his wife said he was hurt. But as Schwartz says here, there are a couple notable things about this. First, the people at the top of American society absolutely love Henry Kissinger. He is their beloved compatriot, and they are anxious to protect his delicate feelings. Think of how Kissinger lives, ensconced in the silken embrace of wealth and power. And then I was reminded here of Nick Turse, who I used to read some time ago, and have one of his books on the Pentagon and its involvement in the U.S. economy, showing that basically the entire U.S. economy is driven to support the Pentagon. Everything from, beyond just bombs and missiles, everything from toothpaste. And I remember he actually makes a point in that book about, and I remember this even on the ship's store. You go to the store and you get Irish Spring soap and Crest toothpaste and all these mainstream brands and candies and sodas and whatnot. And of course, as Terse wrote about in that book, those are, the Pentagon is one of the dominant contractors for these businesses. So it was another point, even before, when people, years ago, I remember this came up when people, again, were talking about we should boycott this or boycott that. And at one point, I forgot what had happened, but they were talking about we should boycott Coca-Cola. And I was like, I would like to see the numbers on this, because given what Terse and others had written on this, would black people ceasing, even if every black person in the country stopped buying Coca-Cola, would they feel it, or to what extent would they feel it given their contracts, including with the Pentagon and elsewhere? Anyway, just interesting. And we're going to actually come back to Nick Turse in just a minute, as a matter of fact. And at the top of this pyramid, Schwartz continues, Kissinger enjoys endless banquets and oceans of acclamation. During the Nixon administration, Kissinger was beloved by Hollywood, often literally. By the way, look at that there. No secret, not so secret swinger. Look at Kissinger getting busy back in the day. And look, and wasn't she an alleged CIA operative? What's her name running the feminist world? And she's hanging out with Kissinger. What's her name? Gloria Steinem, right? Hollywood and all that. Are they saying that they had an affair? Occasionally seen with Kissinger, Gloria Steinem balked at being called his girlfriend. I am not and never, not now, never have been a girlfriend of Henry Kissinger. Well, why are you hanging out with him so much? Worse than being his girlfriend would be, do you agree with him politically? I almost wouldn't care if he was his girlfriend if you spent his time arguing, spent your time arguing with him about his politics and his murderous behavior. Anyway. I don't care who you sleep with, what you doing politically. Anyway, I'm just playing. He spoke at the 1996 funeral for the prominent war criminal Thomas Enders, an event also attended by David Rockefeller, John Dee's grandson, president of the Council for Foreign Relations, CEO of Chase Manhattan Bank, Paul Volcker, chair of the Federal Reserve, who said the standard of living of the average American has to decline. Amalia Lacrosse, an Argentinian billionaire, Gustavo Cisneros, a Venezuelan billionaire. At the height of the Iraq War, Vice President Dick Cheney reported that I probably talked to Henry Kissinger more than I talked to anybody. He just comes by. Hillary Clinton referred to Kissinger as a friend, and I relied on his counsel when I served as Secretary of State. Under whose presidency was she doing that, by the way? But get ready to be told again, we got to vote for these fools. And I relied on his counsel. Right. Clinton rearranged her schedule, giving an award to designer Oscar de la Renta, so both she and de la Renta could attend Kissinger's 90th birthday. In 2014, he attended a Yankees game and with noted humanitarian Samantha Power, who later received an award both named after and presented to her by Kissinger. He served on the board of the fraudulent company Theranos with Jim Mattis, the Marine Corps general, who'd go on to be Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense, and George Shultz, who was Secretary of State for Ronald Reagan. Kissinger joked that he didn't ask questions of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos, because we were all afraid of her. This week, the Washington Post granted Kissinger's son, David, president of Conan O'Brien's production company, space to tell us that to enjoy his 100th birthday, Kissinger is participating in centennial celebrations that will take him from New York to London and finally to his hometown of Firth, Germany. Even my mother used to always complain, like, first of all, she hated that a Jew would be doing what he did, but that she always said, how could he be in this country and never lose that damn German accent? Then consider those down the bottom of the pyramid, the Cambodians, Vietnamese, Laotians, Timorese, Pakistanis, Latin Americans, and many more, whose lives and bodies were torn to shreds by Kissinger. The many more here includes U.S. soldiers whom Kissinger referred to as dumb, stupid animals to be used. Here is what Terse writes about one such person he met while reporting in Cambodia. Round-faced and just over 5 feet tall in plastic sandals, Mayes Lorne lost an older brother to a helicopter gunship attack and an uncle and cousins to artillery fire. For decades, one question haunted her. I still wonder why those aircraft always attacked in this area. Why did they drop bombs here? When asked about it himself, Kissinger just said, I'm not smart enough for you, and stalked off. He said to play with it. In terms of, he said, go ahead and play with what you're doing here in terms of your journalism, and do what you want to do, because the point here, the political and media elite, business and media political elite of this country love him. They got no problem with him. Ha ha ha, Henry, you're a war criminal. Ha, ha. Yeah. So in this context of Memorial Day and marketing U.S. history and militarism, the narrative, it's perfect that Kissinger would have gotten all this praise and attention recently. Because if we just go back a few months, we can see sort of the African or the extent of Kissinger's work and or similar styled work on the continent of Africa, because Nick Turse had been doing and I just pulled this up from what he wrote a few months ago at the end of last year about what U.S. Africa Command doesn't want you to know. And he talks about 10 years ago, he embarked on a quest to answer the question on Tom Dispatch, chronicling a growing American military presence on the continent, a buildup of logistical capabilities and outposts, and the possibility that far more was occurring out of sight. Keep your eyes on Africa, I concluded. The U.S. military is going to make news there for years to come. And of course, it would, from its inception, according to its first commander. What he doesn't put in here, of course, is that the first commander, General William Kip Ward, is a Morgan State alum. HBCU AFRICOM was intended to be different kind of a command. Less hardcore, more Peace Corps. So what does that mean? Soft power as in CIA soft power? In 2012, Ward's successor, General Carter Ham, told the House Armed American Services Committee that small teams of American personnel were conducting a wide range of engagements in support of U.S. security interests. Years later, retired Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who served at AFRICOM from 2013 to 2015 and headed Special Operations Command Africa until 2017, would offer some clarity about those engagements. Between 2013 and 2017, he explained American commandos saw combat in at least 13 African countries: Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Somalia, South Sudan, and Tunisia. U.S. troops, he added, were killed or wounded in action in at least 6 of them. AFRICOM was in October of that year. Let's see, what year were we talking about here? Sorry, I lost track of it. 2017. AFRICOM was finally forced to abandon the fiction that U.S. troops weren't at war on the continent after ISIS militants ambushed American troops in Niger, killing 4 and wounding 2 more. And wasn't the AFRICOM response to that depicted at the beginning of the first Black Panther film? Because remember, right? Wasn't the first Black Panther, the first scene of Black Panther was defending continental Africans? I don't know. I'll check the chat shortly, but I feel like that was Hollywood's defense of that activity, or I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. In 2010s, I would in fact help reveal that the U.S. had conducted at least 36 named operations and activities in Africa, more than anywhere else on Earth, including the Middle East. Among them were 8 127E programs named for the budgetary authority that allows special operations forces to use foreign military units as surrogates in counterterrorism missions. That's beautiful. That's just beautiful. Oh yeah, this is just them recounting what the American soldiers were saying about Nigerians. You can't put Nigerians and intelligence in the same sentence. This is, in other words, that was the joke I made in my head was hearing Ice Cube's message to the Oreo cookie. This is what they think about you. Nigerians, this is what the Americans really think about you. While they may be giving you some money and military weaponry, this is what they think about you. And AFRICOM standards, maybe that's not really so long. Let's see. Failures at quelling terrorism, promoting stability in places like Burkina Faso, Libya, and Somalia. Like, you know, and of course, we know what happened, well, in all of these places, but it just feels like wherever these folks show up, oddly, things don't go well. Oh no, it's just all right. A little bit of a detour here. Let's just keep moving here. Let's just keep moving here. back to a little bit of a turn here. Broadly speaking, this is all under the same theme of Memorial Day being a marketing campaign for U.S. Western interests, capitalism, commercialism, militarism. So, but I don't even know what, I mean, the only reason this is honest, this is the only reason this is JPMorganChase and Jeffrey Epstein were both involved in a strange offshore company called LiquidFunding. That just sounds gross. I even wrote in my notes, yuck. That just sounds, but Epstein, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, LiquidFunding, ugh. On May 24th, the Martins published this Friday and Saturday. JPMorganChase's chairman, CEO Jamie Dimon is scheduled to sit for some very uncomfortable questioning in a deposition concerning what role he played in allowing his bank to serve as a vast cash conduit for Jeffrey Epstein, which enabled Epstein to perpetuate his sex trafficking of underage girls. I mean, but what, seriously though, can we really be mad at that? What are you supposed to do when you have that kind of endless reserve of wealth and cash? I mean, seriously. You supposed to redistribute it? What are you supposed to do? Invest it in infrastructure, education? Come on, what are you supposed to do? No. Sex island, baby. The Attorney General's Office of the U.S. Virgin Islands has filed a federal lawsuit against JPMorganChase that makes devastating charges against the largest bank in the United States. It alleges that JPMorganChase sat on a mountain of evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was running a child sex trafficking ring as it continued to keep him as a client, accept his lucrative referrals of wealthy clients, and provided him with large sums of cash and wire transfers to pay off victims, one of whom was a 14-year-old sex slave, and in quotes, that is. So, happy Memorial Day, everybody. Happy capitalism, America's biggest bank. Gotta love it. LiquidFunding, that's just gross. That's gross. All right. So let's do this. I get to kill birds with stones. I get to say, I told you. I get to take a break. And I get to have us spend a few minutes with, I think, in all seriousness, I really do think BomaniJones is the best, smartest, skilled interlocutor in commercial media spaces going today, maybe ever. Not because of his analysis. He is not where we are analytically. But I'm saying for today's commercial space. Now remember, and I am saying 21st century mainstream media is worse in the sense that it is more restrictive and more sophisticated in its ability to marginalize important thinking. So, whereas once upon a time, ABC would have on mainstream TV an interview with William Buckley and Huey Newton, or William Buckley and the Republic of New Africa, or Kwame Ture, or Angela Davis. None of that would happen today's Angela Davis would happen today, but that Angela Davis wouldn't happen today. So in this context, I really do mean it. I think BomaniJones is remarkable in his ability to do what he does the way that he does it. So I just want to, shout out to whoever sent this to me, and forgive me, I forgot again who did, but I just want to play a few minutes of this discussion, which again, most importantly is saying that I'm right. And Jared told you, but in a way that I would not be able to do it in an environment I would never be invited to. So at the Wharton School of Economics, for a discussion of jobs, the future of the economy, and HBCUs, I just want to play a few minutes of this of this right here, and
you know, as you were talking about how this all came about and the idea of masculinity, which is, you read the history of football especially, and the idea of why sport was put in schools. A lot of this is Teddy Roosevelt and kind of the turn of that century moment of, we got a bunch, it may sound familiar, we got a bunch of weak men. We need to find ways to ultra masculinize them. I don't know what the phrasing would be. And that's a lot of why football began to take the lead. But it is interesting in that moment, it's that 1903 kind of era when baseball comes together and says, no more blacks. And I don't know if there's a correlation with that. And then, you know, it took football a little while longer, but football wasn't advanced. So 1930s, football says no more blacks. And we had, this is the old segregation kind of story, but Negro leagues thrive, HBCUs thrive. How does losing that, or do we have some version of what we had?
It's wrong, bro.
Sport from that moment where there was these great black institutions.
It's wrong, bro.
The same way now, although we'll talk about Dion in a minute.
We will.
But both in terms of, and I also want to get to the ownership issue too. I mean, how do we recapture some of the power that we had then that was taken away in this masculinity moment?
Yeah, well, see, I think the difficulty with reclaiming the power is that the source of the power was something that we don't want to go back to, right? Like the source of the power was in fact segregation. And I remember I was reading, I think it was Collis Temple. Collis Temple Jr. was the first basketball player at LSU. And I think he was 1970 is when he played. And his explanation for why he ultimately decided to go to LSU was, well, this is the best school in our state, and I have the opportunity to go. Therefore, why would I not go to the best school in the state? Now, the question becomes whether or not the best school in the state is necessarily the best school for you. Like, I am sure that most of you believe that where we are is the best school in this particular city, state, wherever it is. But I know for a fact it wouldn't have been the best place for me, right? Like, as a personal fit, it's probably wouldn't have been my bag. With the segregated era, like you look back and see like just what the football talent was, for example, at HBCUs in the 50s, 60s, and even through the 1970s, where Jackson State had 3 Hall of Famers on the team at the same time. Well, why did they have 3 Hall of Famers at the team? Because the other schools still hadn't really come around on this black people thing. And if you were a black person, sure, I'll go to the school where they wave the stars and bars every game. Yeah, I feel right at home. No, ain't nobody doing that, right? But I always wonder in those times how many of those athletes would have still gone to HBCUs in the presence of an alternative. And I'm not judging anybody if they would or would not. I just wonder that. Like we talk about going back to the salad days of, you know, to those eras and the power that it gave the black institutions. Well, what it did was give the black institutions a lot of talent because they didn't have the ability to go somewhere else. But where it comes up, and we'll get more to Dion later, but let's hypothetically say that all the black great high school athletes now go to black colleges. They will now go from being exploited by a primarily white institution to being exploited by a primarily black institution. I think that people have a dream of sorts that, well, if they were dealing with their own people, they would treat them better. You ever worked for a black person before? Any black people here ever worked for a black person before? Did it feel that much different? Like, you know, it might not say like the same level of like sideways shit where you got to be looking back over like, yo, what you trying to say, right? Like you don't have that, but it's still working for somebody, right? It's still the same dynamics of capitalism. Like all of that winds up being the case. The only thing that would be different is that black people were in charge. But with college sports, it becomes interesting because the money in college sports is based on the ways that people feel about the schools. And so we could get all the black players at the black colleges and people are like, well, then they'll have to come and they'll have to give us all the TV deals. Wow. I never heard anybody talk about in 1957 that everybody was running to watch the HBCU game of the week on television. They wouldn't do that. It wouldn't go that way. They'd go to keep rooting for whatever teams that they root for because they're primarily there to root for the teams and the demand for the talents because they all want to beat each other. But if they then just made the decision, it's just all white boys against your white boys, they just be like, well, we'll get the best white boys we can. And then they put it on television. and then they'll watch it. And so I always feel like we need to be careful when we talk about like redirecting these things to Black institutions, that it then requires a real monitoring of what those institutions themselves are going to do and how those institutions are going to treat people. Discussion comes up about Black ownership in professional sports. Number one, people are going to need to come to terms with the reality is it's not going to happen anytime soon. And the reason it's not going to happen anytime soon is this something I don't think people realize. I think both Major League Baseball and the NFL have this requirement. You got to be 30% liquid of the sale price in order to buy a team.
Liquid funding.
About the Washington Commandos, who I think are probably going to get sold for somewhere between $6.5 and $7 billion. You got to have over $2 or somewhere around $2.5 billion liquid. Go look it up. How many Black people got $2 billion sitting in the bank? How many Black people are worth $2 billion? I think there are 8 Black billionaires in America, and you know the names of 6 of them. Rihanna, Tyler Perry, you know, LeBron James, Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, like you can name them. Ain't none of them got $2 billion laying around in the bank. You know,
they're not liquid funding.
The throes of capitalism on this have gotten so strong that we're not going to be able to get there anytime soon. But let's say that we did get there. Byron Allen is the name of somebody that people looked at as maybe being able to buy a team. I do enough work in entertainment. You go talk to some people that work for Byron Allen, and you tell me if they'll think it's a celebration that he gets to own the team. Most of you are probably too young. Bob Johnson owned a basketball team. The stories I've heard about what Bob Johnson was doing when he was owning that team that I don't feel quite comfortable repeating are amazing. But if you talk to anybody that ever worked at BET, go ask them if they were like, yo, I sure hope Bob Johnson gets to buy something again. They're not, you know? And so where sports discussion generally, I find it to be somewhat lacking. And I think it becomes really important to talk about in the context of Black people really is like, as long as this is capitalism, what comes on the back end of it? And so I would like in some ways for us to figure out ways to get some power in this, but the power is in the power that labor possesses. And where I feel like the power can come is there are enough guys that make enough money that they can afford to miss some checks and really grind something out.
Strike.
But we've yet to see that happen, like even once, like a for real deal fight that you thought could change something. We still haven't seen that go down, and that's a big deal.
I honestly, seriously, can you, in a commercial space or a space like that, could you expect to get a better response? I really don't think so. I think Bomani is remarkable in his ability to deal with these spaces and bring a level of intelligence and honesty to it that you don't get. I think it requires a certain level of political, acuity, but it also requires a skill. You can't just know it. You have to be able to deliver it in a way that, and he said at Wharton, and you could see the way the question was set up. It's not inviting him to do any of that. The question is inviting him to lean on the power of the segregated experience, the power of HBCUs. Again, I invited my students just this semester, go down to the president, go to Truth Hall and walk down the president's hallway and look at the pictures of the presidents on the wall and watch how long it takes you to get to the first Black one, just as a reminder of what these institutions are. So, and then he broke down all the stuff that I had been trying to say, even in my, you know, in my uncomfortable moments of disagreement with Brother Dhoruba. What are you expecting to have happen here? And as if we can't get the Black ones, we'll just go with the white ones, and that's it. Because again, remember the whole thing about ad revenue, and I brought up the point about Morgan State having a 10,000 seat stadium. Who's buying ads to run on a game that's playing in a stadium that small? And what crowd of white people are going to tune in on TV to watch that? They're not. So there's never going to be competing ad revenue. There's never going to be competing boosters at HBCUs. It's never going to be a competitive situation. Anyway, I just thought that was dope. Is it mockery? I don't know exactly what you mean. I don't know. I don't know exactly what you mean, James. Like, are you saying, is he mocking them or is he mocking something else? I'm not sure. Yeah, but that's not, but as he's saying, Black people don't have the liquid funding they got. Yeah, that was, they probably think that the average fan won't understand the rhetoric. Yeah, they're probably, I don't know that all his co-hosts understand what he's doing. But anyway, all right, couple things here. Oh, I'm running behind here a little bit. Okay. We did the Beige Rage. Okay, couple things left. That I did want to get to this morning real quick. So this is interesting, given the recent couple of discussions that I hosted around the Sudan. This story from a week or so ago was interesting in covert action. Western media distorts conflict in Sudan, underplaying U.S. interests that have driven its past interference in the country. If you remember, this is terrible. I'm so terrible with the names. I can't even remember. My apologies, everybody. My apologies. I don't really have a good excuse for this. El-Amin, Professor El-Amin. When Professor El-Amin came through, a lot of what she was suggesting was that I'm up to be checked on this, but I'll just say for now, she seemed hesitant to want to have any discussion or focus on what outside forces may have been playing on what's happening in Sudan. And I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm just saying, so when I saw this, I just thought it was interesting, a different perspective. So Julian Kola, and I'll put all these links in the show description, so because we're not going to get to obviously all of it, but the point of this story is simply, the short of it is, in criticism of Declan Walsh specifically, and the kind of reporting represented by him in the New York Times and Western U.S. press, this idea that what's happening in Sudan came out of nowhere and was shocked. It was a shock for them to find that war has just erupted in Khartoum. So that's sort of the basis of what this article is looking to be critical of, to say, how could you be shocked? And if you knew anything about the history of the country, its relationship to the West, and had any real connections as a reporter beyond just staying in certain hotels and cushy situations, you wouldn't be so surprised. And this is, of course, part of the problem facing those in the West who get much of their information about the world from Western perspectives and sources. Based on these and similar mainstream Western media accounts, it was as if on one sunny day, the Sudanese military ruler and army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his entourage were hanging out, having a laugh and lunch with his deputy and head of the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo Hemedi and his bodyguards at a restaurant in Khartoum. Less than 24 hours later, both parties in the blink of an eye, struck with irreconcilable hatred and enmity toward each other, would deploy military airplanes, helicopters, tanks, and soldiers onto the capital, firing upon each other at will. As reckless, mindless, and sudden a conflict could unfold, at least 460 people were killed during the first 11 days of fighting, according to the Sudan's Ministry of Health. The actual number of people who have lost their lives is expected to be much higher. A simple Google search on the birth of South Sudan comes up with statements of President Obama. I'm skipping obviously a lot, but just a couple of the other highlights here in terms of what this article is trying to get us to see of outside influence and involvement and interests. A simple Google search on the birth of South Sudan comes up with the statements of President Obama, who, for example, said on July 9th, 2011, "I am proud to declare that the United States formally recognizes the Republic of South Sudan as a sovereign and independent state upon this day, July 9, 2011. Today is a reminder that after the darkness of war, the light of a new dawn is possible." Nice words, but the new dawn did not bring much light, as the new dawn brought renewed war in South Sudan as various different political factions and ethnic groups contended for political power. Obama's pronouncement furthermore masked U.S. imperial designs. It came at a time that Obama was expanding AFRICOM on the continent, and just 4 months after his administration and NATO unleashed a torrent of airstrikes upon Libya. These strikes culminated in the death of Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and paved the way for religious fanatics to parade around what was previously one of the most progressive and stable countries in Africa. In fact, their presence had spread far and wide across the Sahel. Conceding that U.S. aggression against the North African country marked his biggest mistake as president, failing a plan for the day after, what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya, he said, wait, I'm sorry, let me read. Conceding that U.S. aggression against the North African country marked his biggest mistake as president, failing to plan for the day after, what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya, he said. The consequences of that misadventure are still being played on the newsreel. ISIS and other terrorist groups metastasis and terrorist groups metastasis and advance in Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and elsewhere. The free flow of weapons from and through Libya, waves of migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean into Europe, and flourishing slave markets sprawled across Libya. They go on to mention Susan Rice and what she said was our support for the cause of peace for the Sudanese people, coming up with a comprehensive peace agreement. And then, as was said here, apart from what had just happened in neighboring Libya, it was as if signatories to the Berlin Conference had hopped into a time machine. I love that part. Their destination, to connect with Obama and Rice, ostensibly adopting a diversity, inclusion, and equity DIE, not DEI. Wow, diversity, inclusion, and equity, DIE, as opposed to DEI. Mandate to further slicing and dicing Africa. That's bars to me. That's bars right there. So Susan Rice and Obama come back as the reincarnated or are here to greet the returning members and signatories to the original Berlin Conference.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
So by the way, Funk Flex, who that is in that clip right there, has been going at DjEnvy over the stuff we talked about earlier too. They've been beefing about, so that's kind of funny. Anyway, divide, weaken, and conquer. Rich in oil and gold, Sudan was, prior to its partition, the largest country on the African continent, with the exception of Hong Kong and Macau. China, despite its backwardness and susceptibility at the time, warded off attempts to carve its territory into tiny states. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Did I skip that part? Because they go into a part here where they talk about how China did resist being carved up earlier in history, which may be one of the reasons why it's sustaining itself today as competition for the West. But Harvard graduate and equally distinguished KKK and American Eugenics Society member Lothrop Stoddard probably said it best in the title of his 1920 literary classic and New York Times editorial favorite, The Rising Tide of Color, The Threat Against White World Supremacy. You gotta love appreciate the openness. Poignantly, he wrote, quote, towards the close of the 19th century, the world had been earnestly discussing the breakup of China. The huge empire with its 400 million people, 1/4 of the entire human race, seemed at the time plunged in so hopeless a lethargy as to be foredoomed to speedy ruin. About the apparently moribund carcass, the eagles of the earth were already gathered, planning a partition of China analogous to the recent partition of Africa. The partition of China, however, never came off. 70 plus years later, the New York Times Magazine reminded us that such an outworn primitive ideas remained rock steady by publishing an article in 1993 by Paul Johnson titled Colonialism's Back, and not a moment too soon. The subhead read, "Let's face it, some countries are just not fit to govern themselves." He goes on to interview Clinton Zala, who talks about the point about being, close to the ground and what's really going on there, and how the West does not have journalists in position who are suited to get honest reporting. And they talk a little bit more about another thing that Professor El-Amin came back on in the second discussion to talk about, which was they don't do it head on per se, but to talk about the issue of African versus Arab. So as Clinton Zala says, to try to understand the foundation of the so-called RSF, these forces with Hemedti, they started as the famous Janjaweed militia. During the civil war in Darfur, when al-Bashir, former Sudanese president, was fighting against Africans who were rebelling against the Arab government in Khartoum, he allowed private militias, individuals, to set up militias to do his dirty work. So that's the guy, Hemedti. He started his career, made his name by killing people, massacring people in Darfur. So specifically, he's talking about massacring Africans in defense of Arabs, according to his perspective on what's going on there. So there's a lot here. It's fascinating. Just a little bit more here. He's asked, what can you say about the New York Times, one of the largest, most respected and influential media outlets in the world? So I am told, relying on an African correspondent whose first inkling that something very serious was happening in Sudan came after the guns had sounded. Inzala says they should definitely get fired. There has been building up before the conflict broke out. There were indicators that it was a matter of time. So he talks about if you're just in the swimming pool and you're not, close enough to the five-star hotel, you're not in the streets, you're not going to know what's going on. If I was to mediate, he was asked, because he said he wanted to be a fixer, and Zala was hoping he could become a fixer. He said, damn, bro. I mean, one Sudanese citizen said, look, as ordinary citizens, we got absolutely nothing to gain regardless of who's going to win, but we are paying the price with our blood, which is being shed for something that doesn't concern us. It's not even about trying to remove a bad dictator and people are benefiting. No, there's zero. It would be tough. Generally, if you're mediating ceasefire, finding a way of assuring both of them that they're not losing, that their interests are protected. That's what you want, because none of them are willing to back down. So anyway, obviously there's much more to be said about all of that, but I just wanted to bring a little bit of that discussion here. All right, one more quick transition, and then we'll wrap up. Just a quick reminder to and I'll wrap up with a couple buying power issues here, just real quick. One of which, shout out to 2Black. First of all, Black Myth's presentation on the circulating dollar is phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Put it in, bookmark it, because you'll need it to send to people who are constantly, inundated with that mythology. It's a good thing to have bookmarked and quickly watch this and then be quiet. But 2Black sent me something. Apparently, he started messing with ChatGPT and ended up encouraged and was looking at what the ChatGPT was saying about a variety of things. And he sent me a couple things, and then I did the same. All right. And I just want to share you a little bit of what came back from that and why. So and the short of it is, I asked him, he started sending me texts with screenshots. And I did the same similar thing. And I'll let 2Black and Black Myths, I'm hoping, encouraging maybe, that they're going to build something off of this on their own. But just when I ran it just a little bit, I ended up asking 2Black, I said, so I'm going to have to debate ChatGPT now? And he ended up saying, yeah. And what it is, so what AI, so again, I'm obviously no expert, but what AI is clearly doing, and this is about my argument that technology does not revolutionize social relationships. It enhances existing social relationships and relationships of power in particular. So all that this seems to be happening is that this AI is perfectly, it reminds me of the white kids I went to grad school with at Cornell. They're not impressive beyond their ability to recite and recount established, sanctioned knowledge. And that's what we have here with ChatGPT. So I don't know if this is in order, but in response to so initially, let's see. I asked, as did 2Black. I asked ChatGPT, what is buying power? Buying power refers to the amount of money or financial resources that an individual or group has available to spend on goods and services. So actually part of that answer, I mean, that answer is exactly right. Because as I keep saying, it's a measurement of what is available to spend on goods and services that Black people and others do not own. It is the ability to purchase products or services with money that one has. Again, I don't have a problem with that as a basic understanding, because it's only a measurement of what you have as available, or what they want to think you have as available to spend. All right. Buying power is influenced by various factors such as income, savings, debt, and access to credit. Actually, that part is false, because buying power, as I've shown, is a concoction of a formula and a methodology that is unclear and flawed. Both unclear, and to the extent it is clear, entirely flawed and wrong. And its own sources, as I continue to demonstrate, don't acknowledge the sources used by the sources claiming buying power is and producing the numbers themselves disavow what is being used of their own. So that is, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has said, when Nielsen and Selig and these other folks use our work to make these claims, they're doing something we're not doing, and they're wrong. Okay. Buying power is influenced by various factors. Okay. It is an important economic indicator that is used by businesses and marketers to understand consumer behavior and makes decisions about pricing, advertising, and product development. So on the other hand, I'm saying they're right again. This actually is a proper understanding of what it is that it is an important economic indicator for businesses and marketers to understand consumer behavior, to make decisions about pricing, advertising, and product development. It is not meant to measure the actual economic condition or power of anybody. The buying power of a particular group or demographic can also have significant social implications, as it influences the allocations of resources and distribution of wealth distribution of wealth in society, is what the rest of that sentence says. Then I asked specifically about Black buying power. Black buying power refers to the amount of money or financial resources that Black people have available to spend on goods and services. So again, it's more or less correct. It is an important economic indicator. Now, here's where it starts to fall into its own mythology. It is an important economic indicator that reflects the economic strength and potential of the Black community. No, that's false. According to various reports, not cited here, the buying power of Black Americans. By the way, when I asked what the sources were, the top two, and I don't think I have it captured here, but the top two sources it mentions are Nielsen and the Selig Center. According to the various reports, the buying power of Black Americans has been steadily increasing over the years, with estimates ranging from 1.3 trillion to 3.9 trillion in 2020. Obviously, that's not what happens. This represents a significant market opportunity for businesses and marketers who are looking to tap into this growing consumer segment. That part, again, we're back to the accuracy of what it is. However, it is important to note that buying power alone does not necessarily translate into economic or social empowerment, as it is influenced by various factors such as income inequality, systemic racism, and access to resources and opportunities. So in some ways, ChatGPT follows established order of thought, and in other ways, it is an advance. So then I did like what Two Black did, and I said, but Jared Ball says it's wrong. And this is what ChatGPT said. Jared Ball, a media scholar and professor, has argued that the concept of Black buying power is a myth. He argues that the idea of Black buying power is based on a flawed understanding of economics and consumer behavior, and that it ignores the structural inequalities and systemic racism that limit the economic opportunities and resources available to Black people. That's pretty good. Except that I'm also contending that buying power as a concept is itself a myth, because the claims are based on total incomes of the population as what is theoretically totally available for marketers and advertisers to attract as business. It is not in any real, and the number itself is fraudulently arrived at beyond it being a reference to the total income of the entire population. Ball contends that the focus on Black buying power distracts from the need for systemic change and collective action to address the root causes of economic inequality and racial injustice. True. While there is some validity to Ball's critique, it is important to note that the concept of Black buying power is still a useful tool, is still a useful economic indicator that can inform business and marketing strategies, as long as it is not used to obscure or ignore the structural inequalities and systemic racism that impact economic opportunities and resources available to Black people. So maybe I don't have to debate ChatGPT, because honestly, that is a pretty accurate, that's as accurate as anyone has been in trying to describe my argument, I think. Because it says it does have value to businesses and marketers, but that's all it's ever had value to, as long as you don't try to replace it for everything else. So ChatGPT is maybe AI can take over or should take over. Oh man, there was one other thing. Oh man, hold on a second. I am sorry. Can I please have a few more minutes? Okay, but there was one. So I got sent this after our discussion with Dr. Burrows. I got sent a note. And I don't know that they want to be known publicly for this, so I'm not going to say their name, but I really appreciate that they sent me this note. And there was a question about what I had said about Dr. King and buying power, and with Dr. Burrows, and we were talking about debating and having a little argument about what we were thinking King's actual goals and efforts were, and it was brought up that I said King was against Black, that King had explicitly said buying Black and banking Black don't work. And where do we go from here, chaos or community? So I was sent a quote from that book that, so I'm not going to, well, I'll just bring it up here. I'll just share. So the question was, they sent me a quote from where in the book Dr. King does mention in passing, and maybe I'll come back and do this more properly another time, but I'll just do it quickly and insufficiently here. If you read Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, there's a section where he's being critical of Black power while trying to explain why he's seen it rise. So he's saying, look, I get why it's becoming more popular, but it's flawed in a number of areas, including its nihilism, its pessimism, its lack of hope. And he was saying you have to have hope and struggle. And in passing, he makes reference to buying power of Black people. And he says that Black people have $30 billion in income, which represents a buying power that can be used. And then he moves on. So they sent me that statement and said, but didn't he say we have buying power? And I said, well, as I've said, and I'll just read here what I wrote in response. Thank you. First, MLK, like many, misunderstood what buying power is, and in fact did hear what many do, and in fact did hear, that is, and where do we go from here, what most do by attaching it to the total income of the Black community. I've said so much about why this is wrong, the short of it being that what power can a community really have when its entire income is counted as power, only to the extent that it can be extracted and spent on products owned by whites. So he is just wrong there. But he is only making the point in passing. Same with boycotts and his attempt to create, in his attempt to critique Black power. What he says a few pages later is what I think is more important to focus on, and where he is exactly right. And what he says a few pages later in that same section of Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, in fact, on page 51 of the Kindle edition, is, quote, "While there must be a continued emphasis on the need for Blacks to pool their economic resources and withdraw consumer support from discriminating firms, we must not be oblivious to the fact that the larger economic problems confronting the Negro community will only be solved by federal programs involving billions of dollars. However much we pool our resources and buy Black, this cannot create the multiplicity of new jobs and provide the number of low-cost houses that will uplift the Negro out of the economic depression caused by centuries of deprivation. Neither can our resources supply quality integrated education. All of this requires billions of dollars, which only an alliance of liberal labor civil rights forces can stimulate. In short, the Negro's problem cannot be solved unless the whole of American society takes a new turn toward greater economic justice," end quote. So that's why I keep saying people misrepresent and misunderstood both the concept of buying power and what King was himself advocating. And when Maggie Anderson in particular and others truncate him and disingenuously interpret him, they do so only to promote this idea that Black capitalism will work. All right. So the very last thing, and this is sort of, I think, a perfect way of ending with from that point, that what King was advocating is in fact what others might call a need for socialism. So, as I mentioned the other day, I've started reading this book, and I just wanted to shout it out and encourage more of us to engage it and start to adapt it, if not fully embrace it, for our own purposes. And it comes out of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And at some point, I want to come back and have another very interesting discussion about that, but about them, maybe with them. But what they've done here, I think, is very interesting. So I just wanted to share. I've read a little bit of it so far, and want to continue to deal with it. And I'd like to deal with it with as many of you as are interested and willing. The thinking behind socialist reconstruction for a better United States. So the book is Socialist Reconstruction: A Better Future for the United States. And as I explained here in the preface and introduction, the point here is to challenge what is the United States' unofficial religion of anti-communism, and to provide a practical, tactical approach to both understanding what socialism is and what it actually might look like in an immediate future. So I really appreciate that they've done this, because so much of what there's so much confusion around what socialism is and is not, and about the history, and about what we can do legitimately within our own lifetimes, that I think what they've done here is very important, and I look forward to continuing to read through it. So they talk a little bit about the shift in their approach vis-a-vis the Marxist tradition of sort of post the world wars, deciding that they needed to eschew immediate revolution in favor of building mass consciousness. And it kind of reminds me of exactly what came up in the discussion of who killed George Jackson, and the debate between Jackson's forces and Bob Avakian's forces over this thing of we need to build mass consciousness first, and then, versus we need armed insurrection that will disturb everything to the point of bringing other people into the struggle. So what I feel like is being done here by the PSL is without saying it, is they're saying we're coming up with a third way. So we're moving. We're not going to do just waiting for there to be a mass consciousness, that overcomes the propaganda of the state and allows for us to have this revolution. And we're also not advocating armed guerrilla insurrection to precipitate that. We're advocating a practical, tactical approach that is above board and clear and gives people something to work towards in our lifetime and shows them how we can start to make some powerful adjustments to our society and our world. That's how I interpret what they're doing here. So as it says here, just quickly, among the Marxist left, it has been a long principle that no one sketch out a blueprint for a socialist society or government, what it will look like, but that's what the assembled writers have done here, not because we have located a crystal ball, but because it has become politically necessary for our current time. Talk a little bit about some of the history of this. Once the working class becomes conscious of a class, the idea being that once the working class became conscious of itself as a class, understanding its distinct interests and developing its own yearning for political power, this would set the stage for a socialist revolution. This book does not substitute for a party program, but serves another purpose entirely: to demonstrate rather than just declare that there is an alternative to capitalism in the United States, and to start a dialogue with all of society about what such a socialist society would look like. And again, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the differences, but I was thinking of this as in terms of what we were talking about earlier around African Liberation Day and what WalterRodney was advocating in an African context. That is, it's not enough anymore to just say we vaguely want this or that. We have to be very clear. This is what we want, we do not want, and this is what we do want. And I see this book advocating in their context the same thing. We want a socialist society. We can build one. We deserve one, and we basically have what is necessary to do it. So they talk about liberation movements inside the U.S., especially the Black freedom struggle, are also an engine for revolutionary and mass struggle, but are operating in a very different context inside an imperialist state. So I like what they do here also by talking about the United States as the center of empire and what that does mean for those of us here struggling within it. And they argue that to defeat such a state will require a close alliance with a broad working class and multinational socialist movement that consciously joins the fight against national and class oppression. In other words, it requires higher political consciousness. So as I was saying, that they're pointing out that the United States is not at the periphery of a global capitalist system, but at its center, where the capitalist ideological institutions are far more entrenched, sophisticated, and durable. I'm very interested to see more how they build on this point going forward, because this is obviously one of my own, making our fight here that much more complicated. And because this country's ruling class has represented the center of global anti-communism, the unofficial religion of the U.S., this has left a pronounced imprint on the political and mass consciousness here. In such a climate, the class struggle by itself will be insufficient to overcome anti-socialism in the United States. It is illusory to think that socialists can win over the great mass of the working class by virtue of their good deeds and dedication alone. So again, I haven't gotten far enough into the book yet. I'm very much interested in seeing how they build on these points and what it is that they suggest that we, because they haven't quite laid that out yet, and I haven't gotten far enough yet. But so I'm how do they encourage that we move past this? Because I agree, but other than what George Jackson was advocating, I don't know exactly how to challenge this. So I'm looking forward to see how they develop this sort of third way, as I'm calling it for now, in my own head at least. It says we have to move beyond study groups. Winning a majority of the U.S. working class of socialism, or to be accepting of it, requires contending above all with the myth that socialism is a failed project, that socialist leadership and planning lead to economic stagnation or poverty, and that socialism is anti-democratic. So they take steps even in these first initial pages to explain how none of that is true. Socialism is democratic, and it is about disalienating all of us from our labor and having us all benefit from the work that we produce and the wealth that we produce, that we engage in and wealth we produce. If the ideas on the pages that follow entice and engage you, whether you are in total agreement or have another proposal for remedying the crisis of capitalism, then you should consider yourself a socialist. I like this approach. They're saying, they're making the point that from their perspective, we have to become more aggressive in denouncing capitalism and accepting socialism and moving past the mythologies imposed on it that are factually and demonstrably untrue. Capitalism doesn't solve the problems, it causes them. This book represents for the Party of Socialism and Liberation proposals for the first decade of socialism in the US in the 21st century. And I do like this point here that mainstream politicians in the US push a deceptive and Cold War image of socialism as shared deprivation. They want people to think that the capitalist system, where the billionaires get richer while the majority of working people end up struggling to survive, is the best we can do. And what's laughable about this is that capitalism that it's capitalism and the capitalist state that take our stuff. And what was my note? Including the wealth we have already created. And that's my MOBP argument, that we create all of this wealth. Why are we not getting a better share of it? They talk about the various approaches. Well, we'll come back. I'm rushing a little bit too much here, but a socialist reconstruction will shift from consumption-oriented commodity production to the production of universal basic services. And I like this point here. In the US, we already have the capacity to solve a wide array of social problems. Highly developed logistic systems such as Amazon's, excuse me, can be directed towards the elimination of hunger, with food and other necessities being distributed as needed. The elaborate databases used by real estate companies like Zillow can be deployed to connect houses with potential occupants, enabling us to eradicate the racist legacy of redlining and guarantee secure, comfortable, and attractive housing to all. So I like what I see them doing early on in this book, that they're priming us to say we're already capable of doing this. We just need slight, maybe not just slight, but slight adjustments to our thinking and our approach and our interpretation. And we'll have a socialist reality with that doesn't come with a lot of the mythological horrors that capitalism creates about it. What is necessary to make a socialist reconstruction a reality? To make socialist reconstruction a reality is working class power. If power over the state and economy is not in the hands of multinational working class, then we will be forever fighting for concessions that the ruling class will do best to retract. And they're saying this can't be piecemeal. It needs to be a total take, So the following chapters show what the first decade of socialism will look like. Moving beyond workers as being seen as just line items on balance sheets. Workers are unique human beings with hopes, needs, talents, and relationships that must be supported and cultivated. All labor that is necessary for society to function and achieve our collective goals will be recognized as meaningful, thereby overcoming alienation. Forms of labor that are currently seen as less desirable can be better distributed, more widely respected, and better compensated, so that burdens of such labor are socialized rather than foisted onto specific social groups who are underpaid and degraded. So again, I'm looking forward to more because admittedly, and I think it's necessary at the early stages of the book, a lot of the beginning here is what I think a lot of us are used to. It sounds really good. We get it. We agree with these broad, perspectives, but how are we going to actually make it work? How are we going to actually get there? So I'm looking forward to seeing more about how they bring us to that point. But I do like the initial approach, and I like what they're saying is their goal here. So this is as far as I've gotten, the preface and the introduction. And I want to encourage more of us to check it out and see what it do. So So Kami Hilfiger, please read the book, because already they've explained the origins of this mythology and why it's not true. So that's why it's that exact comment that they are attempting to address. So definitely look at the book. All right, good people. That was it. Any quick comments, questions, anything I could deal with real quick? Other than that, I think I'm a dip. Exactly, Emma. Because I had previously praised that nickname on an and I think I have to take that back, because that was an odd. Yeah, that was odd. Oh, I lost my. Hold on here. Yeah, lost my. Okay, there we go. Got the connection back. Get the connection back. Okay, my bad. Okay. Anyway. All right, good people. Look, the book's name. Oh, I didn't. Oh, I thought I made that clear. Hold on. Let me get it back on its cover, and I'll show it to you. Sorry about that. Let me make sure that is understood correctly. Socialist Reconstruction: A Better Future for the United States. And it's a product of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And so far, I think it's off to a good start, doing some important work. It has already addressed one myth showing up in the chat. So look, good people, I appreciate, look, do what you can to support the platform. Put this in, like this thing, put it in the algorithm. You know what else I'd like to encourage of our audience? When you are doing your writing and your journalism, make reference to BPM. Maybe use BPM content as the point of departure for your own analysis, interpretation, and critique. It would be nice to see more of the content on this platform reverberate in the spaces that I know a lot of you engage in, and I know a lot of you work within, but don't always, think to bring us into as a platform. So I think that's another way I think you all can support the platform, because the more we're in people's discussions, the more we are obviously picked up and considered for other people to check out. So that would be helpful as well. And it's a nice immaterial way to support the platform. So if you don't have, or don't feel comfortable sharing the few dollars you make with us, or a few of the few dollars you make with us via membership, Patreon, or donation via blackpowermedia.org, you can just simply like, share, subscribe, comment. Definitely
put it in the comments.
That too helps put the content out there. And but yeah, I think it'd be a good thing, take stuff that we've said here and produced here and talked about here, even whether, and build on it, expand on it, improve upon it in your work. And I think that would help. And that's exactly what I think what we're here to do. That's exactly what we're attempting to do. Right on. Appreciate you, Anthony. All right, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace. If you're willing to fight for it, please do continue to support the platform in any way you can. And I will catch you here at I Mix What I Like next time, and Remix Morning Show all week. And Earn Your Liberation and Guerrilla Intellectual University and all of that. And then, of course, everyone else on the platform doing great work. Sundays last night, Warrior Class, African Spirituality, all kinds of. Make sure you got the bell rung and you don't miss anything. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, everybody. Catch you next time. Thanks again. Appreciate you coming through this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I mix what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Well, everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.